People power growth, but recruiting and onboarding are expensive, exhausting, and absolutely overwhelming. I've been there, and it doesn't have to be this way. Welcome to Hire and Empower. I'm your host, Molly McGrath. Join me as we interview leaders who care about their teams and distill powerful lessons from them. This show is sponsored by H&E, helping organizations to find their best hire and empower them for success. Learn more at hiringandempowering.com. Gang, we have an amazing guest today. I am so excited to have you here, Kyla. Thank you for being my guest.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. So we have the founder, the creator, the podcaster with over 5,000 downloads. She has gotten sponsors for her show with no problem. And I'm so excited for us to hear about youarealawyer.com is the name of the podcast. Highly recommend that you go and download it, go and join, go and subscribe it. You can have past episodes with the transcripts and see some phenomenal lawyer stories and hearing them share about their experience and successes and really how they have been trailblazers in creating very unique career paths. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. It's such a unique, inspiring story. So Kyla Denanyoh, let me tell you a little bit about her background. You all are going to love this. So Kyla, what I know about you, and I would love for you to kind of chime in, that you graduated from law school in 2015 and you took the bar exam and did not pass,
Yes.
right? How many attorneys listening can resonate with that first time? Yeah. And then after dealing with your frustration and self doubt, which many of our listeners can absolutely resonate with as an attorney, as an entrepreneur, as an employee on a path of growth, you began to appreciate the power of your legal education and acknowledge that you could find career success in a very, very non traditional way. And we all know you're not the first person that did not pass the bar exam, right?
Yeah, not at all.
And so now you created your podcast. You are a lawyer, and it was created to take the whispered stories and shout them out. And then you began to seek out other lawyers who were using their legal education to create their own career path, their destiny, and really willing to share their stories. And we've had multiple storytellers on our podcast throughout the years and taught many of our attorneys about the power of their purpose story when they're getting rid of that old stuffy biography that most attorneys use and really from a place of connection and collaboration. And now you serve as an operations manager for an IP legal department for a mid-sized firm. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about, I'd really love to hear about the birthing of this podcast because there's so many different angles we could go here. Gosh, I could bring you back and just talk about you being an ops manager for a law firm. I have many firms that have experienced tremendous amount of growth since 2020 and now starting to look at bringing in operations manager, professional law firm administrator, COO, things of that nature. So maybe we could come back and have you give us the tips and tricks and ins and outs of that. But then you built this podcast, and then now you're really bringing so many attorneys to the forefront to tell their story, tell their why, as Simon Sinek says, in a way that can resonate. And I love what you said before we started recording that every time you publish an episode, you will have other attorneys reaching out to you and raising
Yep.
their hand and say, I'm ready to tell my story,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. On average, I receive 3 requests from every episode. Just this week, I recorded the episodes for June of 2022, which are a good couple months from now. And it's incredible. I mean, the response that I've received from other lawyers is fascinating. And to tell the story of the birth of the podcast, I love writing. Writing is my number
Please.
one passion. And being a lawyer is fun, but the part that I really love about it is writing. I love writing all the time. I love editing. I love all of the stuff. So I wanted to interview lawyers and I wanted to make You Are a Lawyer blog. I was like, I'll talk to them, I'll record it, I'll transcribe it, I'll add in a couple of things here and there, do a kind of biography. I was like, that'll be wonderful. And I had the idea and I kept sitting on it. And I kept waiting and I kept sitting on it. And 3 years later, I was like, okay, I'm finally ready. I'm going to do it. I'm 6 months pregnant. Let's go. Right? What else do I have to do? And my husband says, I really think you should make it a podcast. Blogging is not dead, but podcasts are the new blog, and he was like, I think you really should make it a podcast. You're going to record it anyway. And I was like, I don't know anything about podcasting. He was like, okay, but you don't know anything about blogging either. I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't. so I, as a lawyer, I always over prepare. And so I told myself, and you're the first person I've ever told this to. I was like, grab all the social media, and then if you can be consistent for, I think I said 30 days or 45 days, you can start the podcast. And my favorite thing is fortune cookies. This is a whole tub of fortune cookies. My husband proposed to me on a fortune cookie. I love fortune cookies. I created a fortune cookie social media page, and I would put up a different fortune cookie every day. I would search hashtags about fortune cookies. I would repost them and be like, look at this cookie, look at this. And I was like, if I can do something, I don't want to call it mundane because I love fortune cookies, but if I can do something as mundane as that for my 30 days, then you can do it. And I did it. And I think I went into like 45 days, 50 days. I was like, okay, I'm not going to post about fortune cookies anymore. And so then I was like, all right, you made this kind of negotiation with yourself. You did it, go. So from there, I got on LinkedIn. I started looking up lawyers. I remember one of the first people I saw was a tax lawyer, and she was actually the first guest. I was like, okay, she went to law school and she also taxes. I know tax lawyers, but she was actually an accountant and then went to law school. And I was like, who does that? Or vice versa. And I was like, okay, I want to talk to her. And so I had 8 guests lined up before I recorded the first interview because you can't back out. You have guests already lined up. I was so nervous in the first recording because I remember I would like break out in like mini panic attacks because I'm like, if I don't ask the right questions, this is it. Like, this is all that I have. I don't want to re-record it. And so I was 6 months pregnant. I would be sitting on a little like bar stool with my laptop and recording with people. And I was like, I think it's good. I don't really know. Right? You don't know until you start editing. And I had a little questionnaire of about 10 or 11 questions. I still use that same questionnaire. Now I probably ask a third of the questions on there. Most of them it's just me going back and forth with the guests.
Yes.
But in the first couple of interviews, you can tell I'm like to the book, not even engaging with what they just said. I'm just like, so the next question is this, and the next question is this. Because I had to teach myself that. I didn't realize I needed that. So that is the birth of the podcast. I wanted it to be a blog. I wanted to talk to lawyers. I wanted it to be a blog. We decided to make it a podcast. I did a little baby project to get started. And then once it started working, I ran with it. And I celebrate the fact that I just had 5,000 downloads because I didn't know that Black women were podcasters. I didn't know that Black people had podcasts. And I thought that you had to be a comedian to be a podcast. So you either needed to be a celebrity or a comedian. I didn't realize that people just had podcasts to talk about stuff, right? So that was a really big deal for me. So the fact that I have 5,000 downloads in my 3rd season is incredible because that's more than just me and my mom and my sisters listening. So that's a really big accomplishment to me.
It's an enormous my, oh my, Missy, you are a
Mhm.
marketing machine. Like, I know my buddies, my attorney buddies that are listening to this are like, "Holy crap, this is a ton of amazing marketing." I mean, the fortune cookie,
Mhm.
consistency, persistency, spoken like a true lawyer, like, "I'm gonna negotiate with myself." And so, it's a competition and you amongst yourself, and then you just once you saw proof of concept, like, "Wow, if you do something consistent and persistent with messaging that engages,
Mhm.
messaging that resonates. A fortune cookie, look at the engagement, look at the what you got there, and then you are able to translate it
Mhm.
into podcasting. Because I was speaking with my podcast editor this morning, and I just hit 3 years of podcasting, and
Mm.
I've missed maybe 2 weeks, so I consistent every single Tuesday I drop an episode. And she said to me, I'm like, well, I feel like I'm doing pretty good. I go, gosh, Jen, it's been 3 years that we've been together. She goes, "You're doing more than well. You don't know how many people start with podcasting and give up. They're not
Mm.
consistent, they're not persistent, and they're not dedicated to it." And same as you, my first episodes, oh, I'm so glad I have an editor because I cannot even listen to myself. But just the proof of concept that you have and the guests that you put on your show, attorneys
Mhm.
that are absolutely, brave
Yeah.
and very much, especially if you own your own practice,
Mhm.
talk about truly taking risks and things of that nature. But I love your model where you really couple it with, not all about the law, but really connecting them with their why and their story
Yeah.
and why they do what they do. So for attorneys listening, we there's so many value bombs in here, but many of them tell me they want a podcast, and they're not, I don't want to say afraid, but like, what's the purpose of it? How am I going to make money? And I asked you before we started, I'm like, how do you make your money? And you're like, podcasting, my sponsorship. And I'm like, that's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Talk about leaving a legacy, talk about being a difference maker and about impact and taking your story of not passing the
Mhm.
bar. And so did you ever go back? Did you ever sit for the bar again?
So I did. So I went to law school in Louisiana, and I set for that Louisiana bar exam in July 2015. And I've now learned that I have test anxiety, but at that time I didn't know, right? And I have a good friend who was like, "I sat behind you in the exam," and she was like, "You just made me mad. You're just like just typing, and you're just like not sweating, and you're just because that's who I am, right? If I know it, I write it down. If I don't know it, I'm not sitting here like pulling my hair out. I write the part I know and I move on. I mean, it wasn't the best strategy, right? I didn't pass, but she was like, I was miserable looking at you. I'm like, don't look at her because you're just writing.
Uh-huh.
So, so at that point, I then moved back home to Ohio, which is where I'm from. And I was here and I did take the Ohio bar exam. I took it while I was working full time. I did not know Ohio law, so that was a completely different struggle. And unfortunately, I didn't pass that as well. But what I learned from not passing is that first, everyone cannot pass the bar exam. It's just not in it.
No.
Schools are constantly looking at the passage rates. Most schools are successful if they pass 75%, or if 75% of their students pass the bar exam. It is not a type of exam where 100% of the people pass. It's just not. And I want to believe that that's because the legal profession wants to have the strongest group of lawyers become attorneys. I want to believe that. Um, but it's a lot, and there's a mental toll to taking the exam. It's an expensive exam. You have to prepare for the
Mm.
exam, and it really comes down to how you perform on the days when you sit for the test. Louisiana has a 3 day bar exam. Ohio has a 2.5 day exam. So it's not something that you just walk into all willy nilly. On top of the fact that you just paid $1,000 just to take the exam. So, there's a number of things, and I've since realized that my law school education is not devalued. My brain is certainly not devalued because I haven't passed. Would I love to say, yes, I'm an attorney? Yes, because I have a daughter, she's 1.5, and I would love to tell her I've never quit. Look, mommy did it. But every week I talk to someone who either doesn't practice or practices and has a fun quirk. And I'm like, I know I wouldn't want to practice. Like, I know I wouldn't. It would just be for me to pat myself on the back. And I can't do it for that reason. Like, I just can't. So, um, I did take the exam again and I've made peace with it. One of the first people I met when I went to law school, because we sat alphabetically in one of our courses, and his last name was Howard. My last name was Hemphill, my maiden name. And he always said he wanted to be a school administrator, always, always. And people were like, "Oh, are you going to take the bar exam?" No, I want to be a school administrator, probably high school, maybe college, and I want to do this and I want to do that. He was actually the second podcast guest. And it's funny to think, I wonder if I had the bud in my mind to start the podcast even back then, because we then started talking about senators who go to law school and never take the bar. We started talking about all these different people. And so I think somewhere I always knew that people went to law school and did other things. It's just, it took like 7 years to come out and become the podcast, because I do speak to people who don't pass the bar. I speak to people who don't take the bar exam at all. I speak to people who love being an attorney. They just also wanted to open a business. They also wanted to have a bakery. They also wanted to do whatever. So I make sure I cover the full gamut, because outside of your school alumni association, there's really no place for all lawyers, right? The American Bar Association is for licensed attorneys.
No.
There's really no other place that's for just a law school graduate.
Oh, I
So
love that.
you are a lawyer, fills that void. Thanks.
I love that. Yeah, and I mean, even speaking to you, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, you have way too much energy and drive and passion," and about I'm like, Gosh, I can't even see you sitting in a corner processing document." You know what's interesting is so I've been in the legal space for 27 years, and the first question I get from all the time, are you a lawyer? Even when I meet people out
Mhm.
in social setting, and they're like, "You work with attorneys? Are you a lawyer?" That's always the second question that comes, and I'm like, "I am not a lawyer." But I am very, very
Mhm.
passionate about teaching attorneys and working with attorneys on how to connect with the human side because they employ employees. They are running their own business. They have to work on sometimes attorneys are so rigid about just being a lawyer, and they always tell me, "You go to law school and they don't teach you much
Yeah.
other than how to be a really good lawyer." And then you hang your own shingle and you have to you say the word marketing to attorneys, especially back in the mid 90s when I started. They're like, "Oh, bar association, like, no, 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 you can't market." And
Mhm.
I mean, just riddled with a tremendous amount of fear and, just having in their head malpractice about everything and every decision and make and move that they have. Fast forward, here in 2022, and many of the attorneys that I knew when they started out that had the energy and the essence that you do, the creativity, writing books, writing blogs, passion for a lot of the marketing and the connection stuff. And now I'm hearing from attorneys more now than ever. Um, I want to own a business. It happens to be a law practice, but
Hmm.
I don't want to practice law anymore. And then they're kind of constricted with that. Like, okay, I want to make this systematized. I want it to be very good. I want to own the law firm, but I want to move out into podcasting. I want to move out into speaking engagements. I want to write my book. I want to do things of that nature. And then they have a struggle very different than, on the other side of it, of it's very probably similar to what you went through. I'd love your insight on this about I spent all this time, money, energy going to law school, et cetera, whether they passed the bar, did not pass the bar, what have you.
Yeah.
And then now I'm not going to practice law, but I'm starting to feel resenting, having to be chained to the conference room all the time or having to answer client emails. And now I kind of feel like I own a job. And I heard the definition of resentment early on in the pandemic. It might have been Brene Brown or Glennon Doyle, one of those two said,
Hmm.
the definition of resentment is self abandonment. When you abandon your soul calling. And I always remind my clients of that to say, okay, well, let's unpack this. I'd love your insight, a little bit of what helped you flip the switch, so to speak, and really give yourself permission and celebration to say,
Yeah.
I went to law school. I learned a lot, as you just said, and I'm at peace, like you said, with my decision, and then
Yeah.
take that and use
Great
it as
question.
fuel for your next chapter.
I I would love to tell you that, I started and I was like, I'm gonna empower these people and it's just gonna be amazing, right? But I was terrified. I was like, this is going to be seen as she couldn't cut it. She's second best. Oh, look, she's talking to the losers, right? That was what I was terrified of. And it's probably something in me about being a lawyer. I was like, if you can see the worst side of it here, then at least if it comes, you won't feel bad, right? I was trying to like prepare myself for it. And I remember I talked to a friend of mine who had a pop culture podcast, and I was like, I want to do this podcast. And she told me, she was like, I think you should expand it beyond people who either don't take the bar exam or don't pass to just lawyers who are quirky or lawyers who have this little other side. And I was like, are you sure? I was like, there's so many podcasts for them. And she's like, but there's not, right? Like you're gonna say, oh, you went to law school? That's literally the
There's
boundary for you to
not.
get on the show. And then from there it's everything else. And I was like, wow, okay. And that kind of sparked me to say, yeah, it is more than that, because we are more than that. We are more than people who have a JD. It's incredible that we have JDs, but we're more than that. So what got me started was that spark of wanting to tell the stories. And then once I got into it, I became obsessed with storytelling. I mean, I think part of what I originally loved about reading and writing has now transitioned into podcasting, where I am just telling the story. So back to your question, the creativity was wanting to put the idea out there. That was first. And then finding the medium with which to put it out. We went from the blog to the podcast. So that was another step. I read a lot of books about how to do this, because creativity is fun, but am I going to make any money from it? I would love to talk to people every week and it just be for fun, but it is nice to have a sponsor or two from the show. And there's a book called So You Want to Start a Podcast. I read it while I was finding my guest. And there is a 7-episode curse that usually is on podcasters, where they will get to 7 episodes and then they're just like, I can't, I'm done. And I read a lot of the podcast newsletters, and they say these numbers aren't the real numbers. Let's say there's 2 million podcasts, 700,000 of them are only 7 episodes or less, because people get to that 7 episode and they're like, I just can't. They're like, I'm bored with it. I don't want to do the work
Wow.
anymore. I don't want to talk about it anymore. So I was like, remember I said at the beginning, I got to get to 8 guests. If I can get to 8 guests, then I'll keep going, because, the consistency comes in from wanting to keep doing it, but also if you make it past that 7th episode. So I would say, if you're an attorney and you have a spark of creativity and you're like, okay, I want to do something, what's out there that I can do? Try it. But also don't forget everything we learned in school. Lay out a game plan. Write up a list of what you want to talk about. Have an idea list. I have checklists where I mark, these are the people I've talked to. I have a list already for season 4, which starts in May. I have a fantasy list with, Hillary Clinton on it, because she's a lawyer who was Secretary of State. That's fun. So so use all of the skills that you learned in law school and just
Uh,
cross them over into the corporate part. And I think you asked something about business as well. Oh yeah, you can never undo and unlearn the stuff that we learned in law school. Never. It's impossible. I did not intend to run the podcast like a business, but before I recorded
hmm.
one episode, I had an LLC which owns the podcast. And that's because I'm not telling people not to go to law school, but if anyone wants to sue me because they think I'm telling them that, you'll sue the LLC, not me. Right? Because I cannot unforget the stuff. I can't unlearn the things I learned in law school. So it's okay if you do something else. It's okay if you decide to own a business and then you're like, the mundane administrative part, I don't want to do anymore. You'll never forget. You'll never stop using the stuff that we learned in law school, no matter what it is. If you become a sculptor with Lego blocks, you will still be using the stuff that you learned in law school. So, yeah.
What's your goal? How many episodes do you want to get to? Right now, I see you released episode 42. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
there is no goal. I already have an idea for a bonus episode when I release 50. I laid out a plan. I remember earlier you said you took a 2-week break. I've been taking breaks. I'm actually on a break now because I record so far ahead. I'm always 4 months ahead with my recordings because I just feel more comfortable that way. I just
Yes.
I just do, and I'm like, I thought at first that it would be bad to have this hanging list over me of stuff, but it feels really good to know that I have things in case an emergency or something happens. So, yeah, I always record that far ahead, and I took a break. I think I took a month off between seasons 1 and 2, and it was so hard to get the engagement back that now I go from the end of season right into the next one, and no one even knows because I'm so far ahead with my recordings. So there is no end date. I hope I am still talking to lawyers in 10 years. It's absolutely fascinating. I would love for it to turn into a talk show. I mean, where I'm bringing people on, but no, there's no end date. I could talk about this all day long. It's absolutely intriguing and engaging to me. I'm having as much fun as the guest. So,
Oh, yeah, and I know many of the guests that you have had on your podcast as well, and it's really cool to hear them tell their backstory and their
mhm,
personal story, and I don't know about you, but when I have people on my podcast, I see the ahas. I see the popcorn popping where it really just, like, connects in their bones in regards to their personal story, and then I see their social media and postings and their blog postings and things that I'm on their distribution list soften and get a little bit more vulnerable and to get a
okay,
little more human and get a little more fun. So, what I've noticed through the storytelling format that you have is that you, from my perspective, as a host and as an amazing interviewing viewer, and also having, a failing forward story that we all have,
mhm,
that you're giving others permission to just really own that and really to craft it into what it is that they wanna do.
yeah, and that's important. I like how you said failing forward because that was exactly what I did. But we should own it. I mean, my law degree is $200,000. It's if I don't own it, it owns me, right? So we have to own it. I don't regret the decision to go to school. I don't regret anything that I've learned. Um, so yeah, I own it, and I love it when people listen to the podcast and say, "Wow, you taught me something. Wow, I didn't know a lawyer could do that." I love to hear from people who aren't even lawyers or law students who just listen and say, "I'm in a job I didn't like. You're in the business section, so I listened. Wow." Right? And I'm like, great. Because there's something there for anyone. Like, if you've ever had a job, you can listen to You Are a Lawyer. If you've ever changed your job because you were bored or wanted more or felt like you had a spark of something you needed to do, you can listen to You Are a Lawyer. I was on Clubhouse, and a lady reached out to me and she's like, "Oh, hey, I'm a hairdresser." I think we were doing some kind of like networking thing. And she's like, "Yeah, I'm a networker. How can you make that work?" And I was like, "I spoke to someone who created a unique curling iron in season 1, and she's a lawyer." And we're like, "What?" I was like, "Yes, right." Like, I was like, don't try me. I know an anesthesiologist who went to law school. Like, look, I cover the gamut. Um, so yeah, there's something there for everybody. So,
Mm. And what would you say? Because listen, lawyers, team members, C-suite that's running law firms, PLAs that are listening, they're all of you have, and I love what you said, that created creativity spark within you. But many, even if you own the practice, you still have a part of your quote unquote job that you don't like. Whether it's drafting documents still, and you've been doing it for 15 years, and now you're ready to replace yourself within the practice and allow for that creativity spark to come out. You're Kyla, you're just giving so many value bombs today and so much permission. And for me, excitement for it doesn't even have to be an either or
mm,
conversation. We're not lobbying for you to shut down your practice or throw your law degree in the dresser drawer. What we're saying is, for if you're feeling yourself in that place of, and I do want to mention Failing Forward. That's a book by John Maxwell that my very first coach gave to me in
okay.
1995. And I reference that book all the time because it just really helps shift perspective in regards to, I thought it was going to look like
Yeah.
this and now it's not. So, again, I always love these little play on words. Somebody had said ROI stands for regret of inaction.
Hmm.
I'm like, "Oh, I like that versus return
Yeah.
on investment." I like the flipping of that. And, so I just love what you're saying, regardless of where you're sitting right now. Maybe you haven't passed the bar. We have a lot of law students that listen to our podcast, or candidates that are considering switching over into different areas, law, family law. They might be burned out and want to go into something that's more heart centered, like estate planning or elder law or what have you. So, whatever seat you sit in right now, wherever you sit right now, I really hope you're hearing the message loud and clear that you can really still be go to law school and also encompass and couple it with that creativity spark, and to be able to bring the human side of what you want to do in marketing that you all tell me all the time. And the podcast is such a beautiful way to connect with all types of humans and make a difference for a hairstylist or an employee or somebody in Clubhouse that you're networking with or what have you. So I just really, really want to acknowledge you. First of all, I was delighted when I found your podcast and when I found you. Then I look at the guest and I see so many of my friends and current and past clients that have been on there and just telling their story that honestly, I didn't even know some of them, and just hearing the creativity and be able to couple that, and then hearing also for people that have gone through law school and maybe did not pass the bar and what they've done with that. And to your point, I mean, even listening to your podcast, you're bringing in your skills of
Hmm.
issue spotting. You're bringing in your skills of facilitation. You're bringing in your active listening skills to hear every word
Yeah.
with precision and be able to amplify the ones that really need to be, brought to the
Yeah.
stand, so to speak. I
Yeah, I
love it.
realized with podcasting that my love of words transitions into spoken word because it's still words. And I even enjoy editing the podcast because I'm just like, oh, that was funny. I remember when they, right? Like I'm laughing as I'm editing it back, like, oh, I remember that. Oh, let's put this part here, right? So um the love of words, lawyers, a lot of lawyers love words. I can't say all of them, but if you do enjoy, maybe you hate, sorry, let's say you are getting burnt out with editing that document, but you might enjoy recording a
Yes.
podcast. You might enjoy doing research of a podcast guest. Maybe you can take those skills and just transition them into something like this because it is the same skills, but just being using them in a different way. So, and if you don't mind, I keep looking for this
And
book. You mentioned Glennon Doyle,
yeah, go.
and I'm reading Untamed,
Oh, I love her.
and And I'm like, I
Oh,
was
I love
moving
that
stuff
book.
around so it wasn't all on the back, and I think I put it away. But I just finished reading. Oh, I can't find anything right now. Leslie Odom has a book called Failing Up. He was, and I can't think of his name, but he was just in Hamilton,
Oh.
and he wrote a book about failing up, and that was great. So I'll definitely look up Failing Forward and read that as well.
Okay, I'm gonna put that in the show notes. Untamed.
Yeah.
I have Glennon, she reads the book. I'm an Audible girl. And oh gosh, that book I've listened every once in a while I'm walking or driving, I'll just pick a chapter and it's the right
Hmm.
chapter to listen to at the perfect time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and she
tried
has a
to do that with her.
podcast.
I know her podcast is great. I listen to her audiobooks and then I end up buying them because I'm trying to make notes right as I'm listening, and I'm like, I need to just get a book and just write the notes in the book. So
I do that too. Yeah, highlight. So spoken like a true lawyer, right? You're highlighting, underlining, getting your
no,
sticky notes, citations, all that, right?
I
Oh,
don't
that's
know
great.
where. It was just here. It's funny because all of my books don't have the dust covers on them because my daughter's running around with them.
Ah.
But yeah, so.
What would you like to say to our listeners about your podcast and how you would like for them to stay connected with you and your podcast and learn more?
So I would like to say thank you for listening. And if you have if you've had a job, if you want a job, if you want a different job, you can learn something from You Are a Lawyer. Take a look at the website, look at the different guests. Oh, they look interesting, right? I have pictures of people. I speak to men, women, young, old. I speak to everyone. If their titles, if their job titles look interesting, take a look at that, see if it's something you might want to do. Even if you just want to be an author and write a book, there's someone there who has written a book and can tell you about what that process was like. So please take a look at the website, learn from it, listen to some episodes, and um, I hope that you are getting from this episode that you can do anything. Your education will heighten anything else that you do, but you can always do anything else that you want. You can get another job. You can move to another state. You can take an internship and learn something new. You can learn to market with fortune cookie screenshots. You can do it. Like, you can do it. And if you would just daydream about it and start, you'd be amazed at where it goes. A lot of people think about stuff and then they just sit on it. But if you
Mm.
start, if you move forward, you will probably surprise yourself with how far you can go. So,
Oh, amen. What's that quote? "The time to plant a tree was yesterday."
mhm.
It's so one foot in front of the other, and I know all of our listeners here have a burning something, a book, a podcast, a desire to get out of drafting, a desire to couple their creativity in the law, out the
Yeah.
law, whatever it may be. And I just love your fortune cookie story. I love that you just hop on LinkedIn and next thing you know, you've built a podcast by LinkedIn, which LinkedIn is a gold mine
It is.
in regards to I just love LinkedIn. If you could just have spend some quiet time with whatever it is that you want to do and listening to podcasts and continually feeding your mind because I love that you said dream.
Mhm.
Like, just begin to dream again and then begin to get deeply curious and listen to podcasts such as Kyla's and mooling around and noodling around on LinkedIn and just doing some searching and finding. And lo and behold, when you said, I love what you said, wait a minute, who in the hell goes to become a CPA and then an attorney? Did you know there's a whole organization called AACPA, Attorney
No.
of CPA Association? Yeah, I used to speak and work with that organization 15 years ago. Yeah, there's a
Wow.
whole organization of nutbags like
See, when I
that.
was young, I wanted to be a lawyer, an editor, and something else. Oh, and a librarian. So I was editor of the newspaper when I was in law school. I'm a lawyer now. And then I really was going to go and get my master's of legal science or library science to become a librarian. And I was like, Kyla, you love books. Yes, you want to show people where their books are, but I was like, you're not going to sit in the library all day. I was like, you're just not. Like, I would be sitting there editing these episodes. So I was like, you're going to have to let that one go. But yeah, I was surprised that there's an entire association of law librarians as well. I think it's called SALT, and there's all kinds of things because there's so many people that do. I can't even call them random, non-traditional things with their law degree, things outside of court. So
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just found an organization called Legal Nurse Consultants.
Hmm.
Like, never heard of that. I mean, once you start getting on LinkedIn and digging in and giving yourself silence and
Mhm.
space to dream and to be creative. And it's cool to hear you say that because if you really, really think about it, you've brought together your law degree with the
Mhm.
editing and the
Yeah,
librarian in essence in regards to what you're doing.
yeah.
It's really
Because I
cool.
researched the guest. I get into all their details. So yeah.
Yes. So, maybe listeners, what do you think about this? If we have a listener and somebody who went to law school and has a swan song, a story in them that would it be okay if they reached
Oh, of
out to you to
course.
be a podcast guest
Yes,
and get their
please.
story told?
Yes, please contact
Yeah.
me, Kyla, Kyla, at youaralawyer.com. And You Are a Lawyer is all crunched together. You can also just Google You Are a Lawyer. I will pop up. Please send me an email if you've gone to law school, send me an email, right? Because I can't even say if you have an exciting story because whatever you've done, I'm sure is exciting. Whatever the things that make people decide to go to law school are fascinating. So please contact me. We will talk. You can
Yes.
be on the podcast. I can thank Molly for connecting us. So yes, please do. I would love to share your story.
Oh, thank you for all right, guys, for those of you that are walking, exercising, cooking, working, we're going to put all this in the show notes so you can grab it after you're done listening. We're going to put youaralawyer.com. We're going to put Kyla's LinkedIn information. We're going to reference, have the links for Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, in addition to Failing Forward and
Yes.
Failing Up.
Yes. Thank you, Molly.
Okay, great. Oh, thank you. Keep up the amazing work, and I can't wait to listen to episode 43. All right, until next time, that's a wrap. Thank you for continuing to be leaders leading leaders. We've reached the end of another impactful conversation on the Hire and Empower podcast. Whether this was your first episode or you're a longtime listener, I know you can tell I have passion for people. Whether you're a business owner, employee, executive, or hiring manager, I understand the situation you're in. Hiring, onboarding, and leadership is expensive, exhausting, overwhelming, and if that's not enough, it's also time consuming. My friends, it doesn't have to be this way. There is a team at H&E that has your back. For over 25 years, they've transformed over 4,000 law firms into efficient, effective, profitable assets for their business and made it fun to come to work again. Check out our Smart Hire solution, our employee leadership program, and the 66-day law firm turnaround at hiringandempowering.com.